So the full season 5 trailer for You just came out, and I'm a big fan of this series. In my opinion, it's one of the best series to come out just on Netflix. And today I'm going to be ranking the 4 previous seasons based on worst to best. I'm going to be ranking these based on the storyline, the characters, and just my overall views on that particular season. There are a lot of mixed reviews online about these seasons as they are a bit different, and I feel like most people like the first 1 and 2 a lot, but then weren't big fans of the 3rd and 4th season. In my opinion, I do like them all, so even though I'm ranking them worst to best, I did enjoy watching them all, and I have rewatched them all as well multiple times. I am really excited for season 5, but I do think they did the right thing by ending it at season 5. I feel like that's the perfect amount of series for this storyline and these characters. I feel like if they did any more, they would just be recreating the same storylines. As with Joe Goldberg himself, it is quite difficult to reinvent new storylines when the whole story arc of this person is his love life, and each season they've brought in a new character for him to fantasize over, but there's only so many times you can do that. So here are seasons 1 to 4, ranked from worst to best, just in my opinion, and it is an unpopular opinion. So in the last place we have season 3. To me, season 3 just felt like an extension of season 2. I did like it, but I felt like compared to the other 3 seasons, the storyline was just a bit weaker. I do like Love, but for me, Love shouldn't have been the main character for 2 complete seasons. For me, season 3 is the one that I'd probably least like to watch again, just because I don't feel like it had that much rewatch value. There were less scenes in season 3 that stood out to me as just good scenes. It felt like the storylines were very much chopping and changing quite a lot. Like in the first episode, I thought the storyline for most of the season would have been about how Joe was obsessed with the next door neighbour, but then she ends up dying in episode 1, which was a big twist. On one hand, I would have liked to see the storyline played out a bit more, but alternatively, to have her die in the first episode, it did make the first episode quite good from just a dramatic factor. But overall, I wasn't a big fan of a lot of the other characters. Like the young kid that Love had an affair with, I wasn't a big fan on him and his storyline. And I felt like in the second half of the season, when Joe was putting people in the box and ended up killing the people, these deaths just had way less meaning to them, as I felt like these deaths were just more of like a routine rather than actual meaningful deaths in the storyline. I thought the ending was quite good. I liked how they mixed it up midway through the series and Joe started to become more obsessed with the new character Marianne, who was already in the first half of the season, but he didn't realise had something for her until the second part. One thing I didn't like though was the whole kid story in season 3. I just felt like it didn't really work. But for me, even though seeing Joe in a family environment was good character development, I just felt like it wasn't really that interesting to see. However, I do appreciate the season as it was definitely very different compared to 1, 2 and 4. And I was glad how they wrapped up everything with Love's death and him getting rid of his child, and then starting a new life in season 4. Next for me on the list is season 2. For me, season 2 was very good, but I watched it just after season 1, and overall I just thought season 1 was just a much better version of season 2. I thought the storylines were pretty much too similar, just in the sense of obviously he meets a girl and then gets obsessed with her, and then kills people along the way. And then even the fact of he gets involved with certain social groups and communities within the area, and then introduces all these other side storylines as well. But for me, because obviously season 1 was brand new and fresh, but season 2 was almost like a repeat. The only difference is the twist at the end, with obviously Love being who she was, like this crazy woman, and also the fact that Candace also comes back as well, which I thought were 2 good twists in this season, but without them it would have been very, very similar to season 1. It was still good to watch, but in my opinion, just lacks the refreshing new storyline that I would have liked to see. Now next on the list for me, season 1. I think this was a great season. I felt like the storyline in it, in terms of the main storyline, between Joe and Gwen, was very simple but yet very effective. It was really easy to watch, and I thought that the pacing of each episode was really good as well. Get into the storyline right away within the first episode. Learn about Joe and his tendencies within the first literally 10 minutes. Not just that, but I like the other characters and storylines within this episode. For example, the Peach storyline, where Joe tries and kills Peach, fails, and then tries again. And this was just great to watch. As each episode goes on, you learn a lot more about Joe and Gwen, their relationships, but then also them as individuals. And also one thing that this season has, which is different to other seasons, is that it felt more realistic. Instead of killing being like this really natural automated thing in the other seasons, it felt more meaningful in this season. Joe just had one intention in this season, and that was to get with Gwen. That was to pursue a relationship with Gwen. You learn more about his past through flashbacks and storylines, not so much that it also takes away from the main storyline. I thought this was a great introduction to the characters, and especially Joe, who in reality is a bad person, but we kind of see him as an audience as someone who's almost likeable and justified for his actions. Now on to my favourite season, which is season 4. This is a very unpopular choice, as I know a lot of people actually think this is the worst season. Now there are a few things that I like about this just straight off the back. Number one, I feel like the setting was different in this, as it was based in London, and it was quite refreshing to see, as it was a big cultural difference, and even James was a very different person from the way he looked, the way he acted, as he now has a job as an English teacher, which is very different from his previous jobs, which were in retail in America. So it was a very refreshing environment to be in. It was very refreshing to see this start again. And also as a character, as he's moved country, he's kind of got this fresh start feel, as he's left all his past behind him in America and he's now a new person. This season gave off more of like a dark murder mystery and a thriller, rather than a romance in my opinion. There was obviously a big storyline of Joe and Kate, and his love interest in Kate. But for me, this wasn't the main storyline. The main storyline was about these deaths that were happening, and then in the second half of the season, realising that it was him actually doing his killings. And I really enjoyed this change of storyline narratives. As Joe was officially dead in America, he came to the UK with no kids and no attachments. And we learn in episode 1, instead of following the normal storyline of him being obsessed with someone and spying on them, he was actually the victim of this himself, where he believed someone was framing him for murders. And it became more of a mystery, which I thought was really good, as it left Joe being on the back foot instead of being on the front foot. It felt like instead of Joe having an enemy, he was his own worst enemy in this season. And overall, I think this really worked. The one thing I did differently as well is it felt like they split the season into 2 parts, and both these 2 parts had very different storylines and themes to them. The first part was the mystery of figuring out who the killer was, and the second part was realising that this was all in his head and Joe basically having to battle himself. So overall, I really like this. What were your favourite seasons? I believe based on the trailer that season 5 would be the best, but let me know your thoughts. And thanks for watching.